So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us today. Again, please, we want to make this interactive. So if you have questions, I think we're going to be able to try and respond to those questions as we go through the content. We really view this conversation as a good starting point. We want to get to better understand your business. We want to build a relationship. One of the exciting things that I get to do in my role is work with partners like Intel and work with them to try and bring interesting content where they can talk about some of the business challenges and the business objectives and how they approach, how they bring success to their customers. And so for me, this is exciting to get that story in front of you, the customer, and really help you learn from what we've learned, and then forward this with more conversations and really focus in on your business in the future. So we really view this as a starting point. As you have questions, please feel free to ask. If there's topics that are adjacent to what we're discussing, feel free to post comments, and we'll address those, and we want you to get value out of this. Robert, if you can go to the next slide. I'm going to go through the CDW stuff pretty quick. Our goal is to really be the number one IT solutions provider in Canada. I come from the legacy Scalar team, so KJ Burke. I manage the solutions architects for Eastern Canada, focused on hybrid cloud. And so really, my focus is around how can we help our customers manage this hybrid world that they live in. And again, the conversation with Intel today around how are our customers managing their data centers? How are they optimizing the data centers? How are they connecting those data centers into what their public cloud strategies are, and that. So Robert, if you could move to the next one. Yeah, we'll go. There's all sorts of things to talk about here, but we'll skip this. So just a little bit, we are 178 on the Fortune 500. We globally we can help with your needs, and I'm not really here to focus in too much on CDW, but really we're focused on the services and helping our customers develop processes, and then delivering the technologies that will really help you succeed. I think that's my focus is really all around the customer. And
hey, KJ, maybe you're a very humble guy, and you don't want to talk much about CDW. You want to leave the place for discussion. But
yeah.
I just came back to the market recently and started engaging and doing more business with CDW. And for me, especially when you leave Canada and come back 11 years after, and the CDW that was like selling boxes and taking order. And now you look at all the solutions practices as the world of IT evolve in complexity. And here we are today talking about the challenges of data center, right? So I give your company a lot of credit for evolving with the market and really, adding the capabilities, hiring the smart folks like you to be able to go to the next level in the IT industry. So that's my external perception, right? So.
And I appreciate that, and I think that is part of the perception we're trying to change, and so I do appreciate that. And it really is that IT is really around how you accomplish it, and really what are the services you can wrap around that. And you're right, architecture I think has never been as important as it is today, because there really is a big difference between well architected solutions and poorly architected solutions. And IT has all sorts of influences and pressure coming from external to IT sources, whether it's commercialization and keeping up with what is done in that space. And yeah, so I think that's that. So I don't want to. You're right. It is an important part of the conversation, but really where Intel has driven excellence in the data center and excellence in how they've changed their story, I do want to focus in on that. So Robert, if you could move forward, we'll go ahead and introduce the one more. We'll introduce the Intel team. So I'm going to let you guys talk about yourself, but Hugues, Denis, and Mario have joined us today, and so I think we've got a good coverage from Intel's perspective on what do they have in Canada, what are they doing across the world, how are they really, we got Mario from Intel's IT department. And again, I really encourage you to ask questions because Mario is key to what is that strategy? How has Intel, changed themselves, and how are they going to continue to change themselves? But maybe Hugues, if you wanted to introduce yourself and then the rest of the team.
Thank you, KJ. So Hugues Morin, I'm 20-year Intel veteran, even though sometimes it feels like I joined yesterday. I've started in Canada, then went on to take various roles, actually even and mostly in the data center space at a global level. And I just recently last year came back to the territory. So I am the local sales director, also the data center lead for the territory, and part-time I'm the CDW chief cheerleader for you guys as well. Denis, go ahead.
Thank you, Hugues. Denis Godreau. I'm also like Hugues, 20 years veteran with Intel. I had different technical, sales, managing, leadership roles through those 20 years. And since the past 4 years, I've been leading the Intel Canada team here in Canada.
And then Mario?
I think we lost Mario.
Oh, we lost
him.
Yeah,
we can introduce him. And what's interesting about Mario, folks, we invited Mario. Mario is from our Intel IT team. So it's something that's unique in the industry. Intel as a team that actually are specialists into everything that we're doing to differentiate in IT. And they actually are chartered to have peer-to-peer conversations with the industry. And now Mario is back. If you can hear me, maybe you can finish the introduction.
Hello, thank you. Sorry, guys, about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Yeah, well, hello, good afternoon, evening. My name is Mario Villalta. I'm the director of IT at Intel for the Americas. And I'm very excited to be today with you guys to share some of the best practices that we at Intel had developed over the years on such a fascinating topic and such a fascinating time, to say the least, in terms of IT. Hard to think over, my 30-year career in the industry of a more exciting time to be, doing IT. So more than happy to have this conversation, which I'm sure it's going to be very productive. And actually, I would love to think of this conversation as the first one in a series of other follow-up conversations that we're going to continue to have in the future. And also, and first of all, thank you to our friends at CDW Canada for making this happen. So thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Mario. So we'll just get into it. And one of the conversation pieces that we talked about when we were preparing for this was really around the modern data center. And one of the things that really I found interesting, and maybe if you can speak to, is really that the focus that Intel has on the data center has changed. Can you kind of guide me through, what is the change, and really how does that affect how you service customers?
Right. Let me start, and I'm sure Denis will be able to build on for the Canadian portion. So most of the people know probably the same way that I've been used to CDW away. You're not necessarily following the evolution and the hard work that is done, but Intel has been diversifying, right, and moving from being and PC centric at the beginning, but really a CPU centric into really an architecture company, not only focusing about processing data, but also moving data and storing data in the most efficient manner. It's pretty much see this if you look at a PC as a system. At first, it was removing the bottlenecks in the PC. Now it's removing the bottlenecks in the whole data center infrastructure, and make sure that data is providing its value. Actually, we care about data, but what we care the most is the value that and the intelligence that we can extract from the data. And for that, you need to be able to process, yes, but also store the data where it needs to be fast and close to the faster processing available, right? It needs to be secure, and it needs to be, you need to be able to move it efficiently as well. So Intel has been specializing a lot, modernizing a lot, and really adapting to this this change in the modern data center. Denis?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Eric. So the Intel transformation. So I like to use what we have seen recently with the COVID-19, right, with the pandemic, because that's, I think, clearly illustrates the power of the modern data center and the transformation that happened during that transformation, and it will keep happening, right? Because I guess what we realized, I would say the world realized, is that we find out the strategic importance of technologies and how IT kind of presenting itself as the fundamental piece of the firm, right? So, and it's not just no longer a service of the line of business or the function, but it's really the platform where you can build the value for the organizations. And when you look at the modern data centers and the modern data center strategy, I would say this is really at the heart of that digital transformation that we're seeing. And we had multiple engagement with different organizations in the country, in Canada, whether it was the government, federal or provincials, the telcos, the big banks. So the one that we have seen with the most success in this transformation, that was accelerated like by manyfold so than what we have seen before, right? So we're the one that were able to leverage their modern infrastructure in order to transform and adapt to what we've seen with the work from home, the distance learning, whether it's telehealth, and the I would say the emerging, even for years we've been advocating, right, the fourth industrial revolution and the need to transform, but the one that really get it and we're able to leverage everything around e-commerce. And like I said, so the modern data center is really at the center of that transformation.
Yeah, and so and what I really find interesting, and it's great to have Mario on the call here, is that you know, you behind every massive company is generally a successful IT department. And so when you look at the change, Mario, how has that change impacted the way that Intel handles IT?
Yes, that's a great question. Great question, and hard to summarize in a few sentences. But let me start by saying that definitely this crisis that we all are experiencing has tested to the bones the strategy, the execution, the culture, the vision of the company. Something that I'm sure has happened to every other enterprise, regardless of their size. How has it changed our uh, strategies and initiatives? I wouldn't say much of a change, but in many cases, it is a confirmation of many of the initiatives and decisions that we have done over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Intel had been on this journey of, for instance, mobility, making sure that we enable a fully mobile workforce since the early 2000s. In the case of data center and how to build a modern infrastructure, this is something that as well we had been on a very committed, um, rigorous journey over the last 20 years, where we have evolved from that past where we did have 150, 160 different separate data centers, each of them with their own vision, their own governance, their own processes, into a single cohesive, integrated, standard collection of, rather than 160, 55 data centers. So that's another key vector where we had been working for a long time, as I said. In in other areas like collaboration tools, and of course, the move first from monolithic systems to consolidation, server consolidation, from server consolidation to server virtualization, from virtualization to cloud, from cloud to multi-cloud, from multi-cloud to many of the new trends that we are seeing in the market today. So I would say that if anything, this experience had confirmed many of the things that we have adopted over the years, but for sure it has uh, put a very significant pressure in terms of speed. So things that we were planning to take maybe 1 year, 1.5 years, we have had, to deliver those in a matter of weeks or months. So I think this is a call for not just for a major rethinking of the IT, and more than the IT, the business paradigm that we are operating under, but this is a call for a full embracing of new technologies that we're going to be talking today here.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. And then one of the things that as we were going through that part of the discussion we talked about was really the modern business. And so the modern business has certain qualities, it certain expectations, and then aligning the modern data center to sort of meet those needs. And so really, so you when you look at the needs of the modern business and then how that relates to then the services that the modern data center needs to provide, how is Intel, helping their IT customers? I mean, because really we're speaking to IT. How are we helping our IT customers really deliver that value to support the modern business?
um, Various ways, right? So and it goes, upstream from the data center. Mario talked about the move to mobility, right? So that obviously there's a lot of work and activity that we've seen again because of COVID at the beginning of the pandemic on this, but it started several years ago. Even have some benefits if for some of the IT managers that I was exposed to, I didn't know, is that it's actually much easier in a remote environment to service a PC if you're able to actually ship a new shell if something is bad with the hardware and get up and running again, even though you're paying a little bit more for mobility. But outside of that, it's all about or we hear a lot about the movement to the cloud today, right? And you're focused on hybrid cloud. At the beginning, I'm not sure if you're seeing the same thing from your customers, but clients would engage with us and say, I need to go to the cloud. I need to build my cloud to reduce my costs, right? And they have no idea there's so many other benefits than reducing costs for the infrastructure. And agility is a big part of it. And after that, once you get into an agile cloud scenario, right? It starts with private, moves to hybrid, and SLAs with the public folks out there. Then there's a lot of specialization going on, right? Because it's all about the workload now, and the workloads will require specific accelerators, specific configuration, specific servers to be able to deliver efficiently with the right level of latency the services and applications that you promise to your users.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and that's one of the things that I talk about with customers really is that I think the cloud, the promise of the cloud early on, you're right, was sort of an immature promise, and it sort of appealed to the cost savings, but really when you start to break it down, it's that the different hyperscalers have a value proposition, and it's not just a dollars. There's all sorts of factors in there, agility, whether it's tools that only they have accessibility to, and what's one of the things that's really interesting to me, and I think we're going to talk about this in just a minute, is I think a lot of the work that was done in the cloud has impacted how we manage the data center. It really has, like, the idea of infrastructure as code and being able to to take some of the lessons learned in the cloud and then apply them into the data center. So, so one of the concepts that came up, Mario, as we were discussing, is your one API initiative. And so, when we talk about, well, how do we make the data center, in our co-locations or in our data rooms agile, and how do we meet some of those business needs better, with on-premises solutions? Can you talk a little bit about what Intel is doing, infrastructure as code and sort of your one API initiative, and how that can help our customers, with their agility?
Sure. Sure. So several things, several threads get triggered in my mind when you talk about those topics. One, API and software defined data center, definitely key concepts, key items that need to be put in place. But before getting into those details, I just wanna make sure that I share with our friends here today a little bit of the macro challenge that Intel and Intel IT in particular, which is the organization that I work for, had faced, and I'm sure that these are not exclusive to us. Um, and this ties back a little bit to what he mentioned at the beginning. I mean, in order to get into these technologies and to make possible to make a company, an enterprise, continue to operate under these circumstances, it, it really everything starts with, in my opinion, with three major building blocks. The first one I would say is the need for having a business digital vision. In other words, we need to make sure that we rethink how is it that our company, in this case, obviously Intel, how is it that we are going to operate for the next 10 years or even longer than that? As it was mentioned, we come from being first a memory company, then a PC company, then a data centric or server company, and then we're becoming a data centric company. So, and how do we imagine our customers, partners, stakeholders interacting with us? So everything starts with having that digital vision clear in our minds. This crisis that we had faced has created a lot of disruption across the board. Some companies are being challenged to their very existence. Some others have actually benefit. Some others would have to reinvent. So that's number one. These three, regardless on in which camp you are, you need to think of what's that digital vision. The second building block, I would say, and is I can exaggerate the importance of this, is the culture piece of the company. How are we enabling our workforce, our human capital, to be effective and thrive in this new environment? And number three, obviously, is the technology. And that's where I would like to start, digging deeper into some of the topics that you just mentioned. So when we talk about the technology, a data center, I would say our data center strategy and being able to enable a real, true software defined data center and one API, all of that is that it goes under what we call at Intel IT our data center strategy. And it's not just about the facilities themselves, but the overall stack. The slide that you were just showing, it's really an X-ray of all the infrastructure for all of our 55 data centers, starting from the hardware, the operating systems, then the different environments, the provisions to make sure that we have this scale out capability that has been absolutely essential to maintain operating our company pretty much 100%, but also having this public cloud capability so that we are able to focus internally on the applications that deliver competitive advantage to the company and not necessarily on commodity applications that can be delivered by third parties. So this chart that you see here, I think it's at first glance it might seem a bit overwhelming, and the reason is that yes, might be overwhelming because it's a complex environment. But I think the key value here is that you see one of the things that we wanted to make sure at Intel IT is that we have a cohesive, as I said earlier, integrated environment that it delivers the best infrastructure to the best or to the right workload, depending on what customer base you belong to. So if you read this from left to right, you see that we have four environments. We have an office environment, an enterprise environment, a design environment, and a manufacturing environment. And each of those four constituencies have different needs. So before getting too deep into this, what I want to highlight is that first, let's not lose sight of those three elements: the business vision, the culture, that technology, and within that technology, the very essence, the core of the whole IT building is our data center strategy. And that data center strategy cannot be understood without software defined uh, tools, cannot be understood without a serious look into multi-cloud, cannot be approached without the importance of having an application uh, optimization strategy so that we can face and resolve what we call technical debt, which is another concept which is absolutely essential to make all these things work together. But I would just stop there.
Yeah, and technical debt's an interesting topic as well, because I think we all deal with technical debt in one way or another, whether it's an old application that we're still running maybe on a mainframe or an AS400, or we're running it on old like Sun Solaris, or coming from a mining background, we had all sorts of Sun Solaris stuff, um, and you're right, it becomes difficult to innovate when you're still reliant on those systems. And then when you start to talk about mergers and acquisitions, and bringing multiple companies together, and having legacy systems where you're running your financials, and you still require those, but it becomes a challenge there.
Yeah.
So you talked about going from more than 170 data centers into 55 data centers. Like, how did you really approach technical debt? How did you change that from being a limiter to being able to really accomplish the goal, which is to retire some of those services? What was Intel's approach to that?
Sure. So technical debt, just one quick, to level set and make sure that I'm explaining myself here. But by technical debt, basically at Intel IT, we understand this collection of processes, methodologies, tools, applications that have accumulated over our 50-year history.
Mhm.
And we have come to a point about 5 years ago uh, where we ended up with more than 4,000 applications, all kinds of applications, all flavors, shapes, languages, etc., etc. Some even applications that nobody knew they were there. However, we were maintaining them. In some cases, we were maintaining the groups of developers. So how do we get into this effort successfully of introducing new technologies and preparing ourselves for the digital transformation when you are carrying that burden? And this is something very common in many of our enterprises. So first of all, we need to adopt certain principles and stop debating. We started agreed to stop debating on several things. First one was we needed to make sure that the right place for the workload, for a given workload, not necessarily is on-prem, not necessarily is off-prem. In other words, we adopted the principles of the right workload on the right place. We adopted the principle of mobile first so that we were able to take advantage of the capabilities, of the full capabilities of the devices that we were using to run those applications. Third, we adopted the principle of working from anywhere, being able to work from anywhere. Another principle that was key, we needed to make that secure, making sure that our assets were being secured and that our information security was actually an edge, not uh, an obstacle for our people to work. So there were several guidelines. Based on the first one, the right workload on the right place, then we came up with an inventory of those 4,000 applications. And then we started a very difficult process actually to identify and ask the question, is this really needed? Do we really need a group of internal developers to maintain an expense report application? Do we really need a X number of developers to maintain a financial system to calculate, I don't know, the cost of vacations of our people? And when we did all those hard questions, we found out that a good percentage of those systems, of those applications, and all the infrastructure behind it was not really needed to have it internally. So you go through several iterations of that, and I don't want to trivialize the exercise because it is a difficult exercise, meaning that nobody at Intel IT or at Intel thought that their application was not needed. Everybody thought their application was not only needed, but critical to the operation of the company. So there were some tough conversations where you have to convince that group in that department that they need to sacrifice some of the homegrown features for the benefit of a third party doing that and doing it in the best possible way. Uh, After going through several iterations of that technical debt reduction effort, uh, we ended up basically in four situations. Meaning, when you go through that list of 4,000 applications, you find out, number one, that there is a significant group of applications that you need to tolerate. It's simply too much of a risk or too high of a cost to get rid of certain workloads or applications. So you would need, that's an executive decision where you have to say, okay, we know this is not the state of the art, but we are gonna tolerate this for now. That's situation number one. Situation number two, we found some applications that we realized that we were in a position that we could invest in them. In other words, that we can re-architect them to make them cloud aware so that we were able to take full advantage of the cloud. Otherwise, we could have the cloud, but we really cannot take advantage of it because our applications were not really defined or designed for that. So that's a second group of applications, those that were needed to be invested on or re-architected. A third group of applications are those that need to be migrated. And that's what I was saying, when you find these commodity application that can be done better by subscribing an external public cloud provider. And we ended up, for instance, with an expense report application from a certain provider that does a great job on that. So we can release resources from that and reallocate them to other areas of the company. And number four, the fourth situation where you end up when you go through that technical debt reduction exercise is end of life, meaning there is a significant group, in our case, um, probably around 500 applications, believe it or not, that were not needed, simply were not needed. So basically, we sent a note to the identified owners, hey, by this date, this application is not going to be maintained. Say bye-bye to it because this is gone. Uh, when you go through this exercise of technical debt reduction, then you start seeing where your key challenges are and where is it that the public cloud or the private cloud would deliver a highest ROI for your company. Trying to get into technology or adopting, technology just for the sake of technology without doing this internal exorcism, so to speak, internal to the company, uh, it's really hard to really take advantage of the benefits that the cloud brings, and not just the cloud, but many other technologies that we see today in the marketplace.
Yeah, and that's where, where we spend a lot of time with our customers is working through sort of workload assessments and drilling in. And I think you hit upon a couple of challenges there. And one of the challenges is that you have these workloads, you have they're all sprawled everywhere. And a lot of our customers, even internally, it's tough to map workloads to applications. And really, like, your users don't care about the workload or the server, whether it's a VM or a physical server. They really care about the application, and creating that collection so that you have it addressable as a single application is challenging enough, let alone, okay, what's it used for and how is it used? And so you're right, breaking down sort of that 6 R's. I know you talked about four buckets, but sort of the 6 R's in that approach. That we talk
Yeah.
about that with our customers a lot. And so I guess, for the customers that are on the line here and the customers that are going to be watching this later on YouTube, one of the really interesting things that we have the opportunity to engage with Intel is around really getting their guidance on some of this. And so, where we have the opportunities to continue this conversation and engage, whether it's with CDW, whether it's CDW and Intel, you know, we have some intellectual property, and we have some guidance that we can have great conversations with our customers and help them learn from some of these lessons that Intel and CDW have learned going through this process themselves. So I think that's
Mhm.
I think that's one of the keys to take away is, as you pointed out, this is really an intro conversation, trying to let the customers understand that we do want to engage with them further on these topics. So
Absolutely.
as they're looking at their infrastructures, Intel is a great resource to reach out to. CDW can help facilitate that, and then really have more targeted conversations about their specific. So I want to shift. You talked about some guiding principles, and I asked Robert to put them up there for a minute. But Robert, if you could bring up the guiding principles, and I wanted to go to Denis, and really just ask about this a little bit, because I think, again, like, Intel is a leader in technology space, and how Intel really looks at driving their business and providing value, I just want you, if you could talk a little bit about these guiding principles and how that impacts, how Intel works with their customers. Oh,
Sorry, you're talking to me, KJ, right?
yeah, you, whoever's
Okay,
the
okay,
best.
okay. I tell you, we're looking for Mario to go a little bit more in details on the. Okay, so basically, if you look from a business point of view, right, when we engage with customers, so it's really for us really a consultative approach, right, working with the customers, engaging our ecosystems partner like CDW to really look at the overall holistic view of the customers. And really, I think Mario hit a point when he mentioned that digital vision, right? That's really or or lead with customers when we talk about digital transformation, that they have to digitally enable their operation, manufacturing, their product and services, and digital experience, create a digital experience for their employees and customers and partners, and really the centerpiece of that. So it's really that data center strategy that really enable all of this, because like I mentioned at the beginning, right, when we look at the COVID right now, a lot of emphasis was like work from home, distance learning, which people think about the device, but really the magic happened in the data center. That's where you compute, you move, you store, you secure all, you analyze all your data, and really looking at how they can transform their data centers and look what is the best way for them to optimize their strategy. So that's how we're going to be working with the customers and pulling in all the ecosystem, right? Because Intel, we're already at the foundation of that transformation, and pretty much of all the technology that will be used will be at the heart of it, right?
No, absolutely.
Couple of points, if you allow KJ to add, right? So, I'm glad you made the point. Intel has this group in IT that can come and it's the best kept secret at Intel, right? We can have completing the CDW services and knowledge and intellectual property. We can bring solutions architects that are sales and market that will help you architecture, but Intel doesn't sell you anything per se, right? And our IT group is not charging anything to sit down and share best practices. And it's all going to be based on how Denise says it, right? A consultative approach, understanding your business strategy, where you want to go, and what would be, some of the recommendations that would help you get there, right? And I think that's an important thing. And then the second point I wanted to make is that we talk a lot about the data center, but the reality today, especially in digital transformation, talking to some customers and entering the world of IoT, and some of it is necessary because of COVID, then you realize that, if you centralize everything in the data center, then you don't have the right level of latency and response time, for your customers and users out there. So what we saw centralizing in fewer data centers right now is also being distributed somewhat at the edge, right? To make sure that, you compute some of the edge data to take advantage of only what's required. And therefore you don't have to compute, 100% of the data, and sometimes keep 100% of the data to analyze and get intelligence out of 2% of the data. You're going to be actually balancing your infrastructure
and minimizing your network, right? So what is the cost involved with it? Yeah, a good point, Eric.
Yeah, and so I like that, and you touch on a concept or an idea that I always try to keep in mind, and that is, and I think Mario talked about this. It was, it was one change to IT, and there was another change to IT, and we went from monolithic massive systems into disaggregated systems all over the place, and we went back to VMware, where we were loading multiple virtual machines on much larger systems again, compared to what they really needed. And I think one of the things I really enjoy about IT is we're always one major innovation away from having to completely rethink how we do things, which I think really speaks to the agility that's talked about in your guiding principles. And so how do we look forward and prepare for that? And so when you look at IoT and when you talk about that edge computing, not just gathering data at the edge, but also being able to compute against that data at the edge. What types of conversations are you having with customers, and how is Intel approaching how they want to gather data at the edge and help their customers get value out of that?
Denis leads a new initiative at Intel because people are just pulling their hair out about the complexity of trying to connect. Take an industry, right? A plant of some sort, right? You have various machines that have the capability of communicating, but they might not be today 100% able to. But how do you integrate all these various, not only sensors but software, and aggregate everything to have a single pane of glass and be able to have a look at all the data? And especially true if you have other parts of your business in the supply chain or different businesses, right? The industry, if you have only one plant, that could be fairly simple, right? But what if you went through an acquisition? So customers are looking at this and they're very challenged by the complexity of it. But actually, what we found is very efficient is just up level the conversation, because when you realize that Intel has the chance of being the underlay architecture for a lot of these softwares to run. So by running on Intel architecture, they're actually compatible. So we're pretty much telling the customer, we're going to help you create the right hooks, but focus on the data lake and focus on the business needs and what you want to extract from the data. And that's where the value is. A lot of the projects in IoT actually fail because that part is overlooked, right? And it's a fun geek project, but it needs to be tied to the business and have a measurable ROI. So Denis, I don't know if you
Yeah, no, you're
add.
spot on, Eric. So we see that big, I won't say collision, but we see that merge between the OT world, right? So all the operational technology and the IT technology, and those will need to fuse together. And that's exactly the level of engagement we have with customers, like taking that, like looking on top of it and really fusing those two worlds, and like you said, put everything on the data lake and making sure you do, and you compute and you do the right decision at the right place, right? So, and that's seeing as one infrastructures for the organizations, and really you extract that business value for all the data you create, whether it's your premise, your process, your people, so that you're making all the right decisions, but using one architectures.
No, I think that's really powerful, because I think what we're seeing is, with all of the different consumption that our customers have, is the closer you can get to as a service as possible, the happier our customers are with solutions. And so when you're talking about sort of Intel more as a platform with which you're operating on, there's a lot of power there, right? And the diagram that Mario was talking about earlier really refers to the complexity that's there. Just because that complexity has been abstracted doesn't mean it's not there. And I think that's where, the IT customers on the phone, myself in my past life, that's really, the challenge there is a lot of complexity there. And so I just want to touch on, one thing I was really, I'm going to go and do more learning on is really this one API initiative. And when you talk about managing the data center and sort of infrastructure as code, and how do you empower, IT system administrators and IT administrators to manage more in an effective way. So Mario, when you look at the modern data center and how you're managing it as infrastructure as code, where is Intel focused in their internal IT to really improve that process, or what have you seen over the last couple of years that has really driven value for your Intel IT teams?
Yeah, really the highest bang for the buck, so to speak, had been the adoption of that integrated strategy for data center. Without that, it's very difficult to reign in chaos, rather than chaos reigning all over the place. Today, we use in many of our data centers, and again, this is a journey, and I don't want to give the impression that we are already there and that we achieved nirvana and that we are there. We are in a journey, and in many cases, we are still learning the hard way. But again, so what has been the highest bang for the buck in our case is the adoption of that data center strategy. What does that mean? What do I mean by data center strategy? That means the integration of aspects like design, site selection, disciplines that traditionally had been out of IT, like electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, architectural design of our data centers. That's part of our data center strategy. Why? Because that brings a lot of value. We're very proud at Intel IT to have the most PUE efficient data centers in the world. PUE, power utilization efficiency. We're running at 1.06 today. That means that basically all we have is a 6% of overhead in terms of energy utilization in our data centers. I say that fast, but it has taken years to get to that point. And one of the reasons, or one of the key contributors to get to that point, had been adopting those disciplines and those design innovations and introduce them into our data center strategy. But that's just one piece. The other piece had been the densification of our data centers so that we reduce the footprint and increase the power utilization at the rack level. Number three, another key item, the adoption of disaggregated servers. That's another item that has helped us a lot reduce our total cost of ownership and our refresh cost for servers in about 45%. That has been another topic that has delivered a lot of value. DCIM, data center information management. How can we have a single pane where we can monitor and have a single version of the truth of all the many different aspects happening in our data centers, from areas of the building where things are getting hotter to areas of our storage pools where storage is not being optimally utilized. So how do we come up with that tool? And that has been a dream for many, many years. Uh, I should say that today we have progressed a lot into this, into having a DCIM, a tool that help us monitor the facilities, the resources utilization, the many different aspects involved in the management of a data center. And again, more than happy to dig deeper on any of these topics in future conversations. Um, the other thing that has been absolutely essential is I guess this is the third time I mentioned this, is that this obsession for standardization and integration under a single architecture. Otherwise, it's very hard to come up with governance and some level of consistency when you don't have integrated infrastructure. So that's one thing. I would like to explore some other items that you guys shared on the slide, if you allow me, for just.
So just a
Yeah,
quick note. So we've got
please.
2 minutes. Unfortunately, I have to stop it there. So you got 2 minutes.
I know.
But again, anybody that was here on the call, if you're listening to this later on YouTube, we want to engage, right? Like, we want to be able to go through your challenges, want to be able to bring the expertise we have, the solution architects on the Intel side, solution architects on the CDW side. We want to engage with you. We want to learn more about your challenges, and then offer up innovative solutions and things that you can adopt. And you're right. Like, my team's a pre-sales team. We just want to engage with our customers and help drive value. As you mentioned, that there are resources available to go through these things. You don't have to learn everything trial and error. Sorry. So you can wrap us up, Mario.
Yeah, well, just trying to be very brief here. So if anybody's asking, okay, if somebody's scratching their head and say, where do I start? I mean, this thing is a nightmare. Where do we start? So if I'm being asked to summarize, what are the 5 things that any person who is responsible for putting together the data center strategy for the future or for today? Number 1, any modern data center needs to be 100% uptime. So the days of downtime and unscheduled downtime are gone. Don't need to explain that. Number 2, the data center has to be green. In other words, has to be friendly with the environment. Number 3, has to be multi-cloud ready. Number four is it has to be cost effective, because many of the savings that we at Intel IT had been able to achieve, that has also enabled us to invest in other areas of the business, are because we are run very cost effective data centers. If most of our money is being allocated to keep the business running for zero innovation, that's a big no. So those data centers need to be cost effective. And number five, and this is going to be the fifth time I say it, they have to be integrated. They have to be built over a standard infrastructure that takes advantage of the state of the art technology, not just on processors, but on memory, on network, and a full portfolio of products that make that possible. Otherwise, it's going to be a piecemeal data center, something that needs to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And when you, especially when you start looking at building up sort of, code-based infrastructure, and infrastructure as code, the idea that I can make something and then utilize it across my organization, rather than our value as IT administrators isn't I manage that box anymore, or I manage that switch or that router. It's really that I manage templates and ways of really architecting and controlling the data center that is a force multiplier. I create a template and I get value out of it every single time I consume, right?
Right.
So absolutely. And you're right. And when you talk about green is great for the environment, and it does contribute to your bottom line, especially if you're in co-location. Most of your co-locations are going to charge based on your power consumption, and so it is in your best interest to be. So real quick, Hugues, anything to end on?
I thought when you said where do I start, I usually start by calling Denis, but I guess that's not the right call to action, for the audience. No, I think you hit it. When I was hearing Mario talking about, I remembered the first actually open cool air data center, done, I think, in the world. There was a white paper done. Key contributor was one of our IT guy, Dan, that I met several years ago. And the other thing that we also doing that I remarked that it is pretty amazing is we did a bunch of testing on operating on higher ambient air, which helped a lot the PUE, if I remember, as well, right? So the equipment can take it because it's good solid equipment. You will save a lot if you tone down a little bit that crack unit. So outside of that, just want to say thank you, KJ and the team. It's great. Again, it's the first of hopefully a lot of dialogues. We're here to try to help you navigate these waters and hopefully take out some of that complexity.
No,
Right.
thank you. And Denis, anything to tag on?
No, thank you. Same thing. Thank you. And just want to remind everyone, so the super important, the digital transformation data center is at the center of that, and really leverage CDW, us, Intel IT, to making sure that you are spot on your strategy to design your data center. So that's super vital moving forward. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our customers, it doesn't cost you anything for us to have another conversation. So, reach out. We want to engage. And thanks again, Denis, Hugues, and Mario. Really appreciate your time. I was very excited about this. This is one of those things I really enjoy about my job. So thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
It shows. All right, KJ.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.